Elderly woman doesn't stop trying to rescue. Canine German Shepherd, tied to a tree. Then, something sad happens. She was 76, with aching knees and a heart far stronger than her body. Every day, she walked into the woods behind her house, carrying a small basket, not of flowers, but of scraps and water. Because deep between the trees, tied to an old oak, was a German Shepherd canine no one else dared to approach. He growled, he barked, he cried, but she kept coming back. Neighbors called her crazy. That dog's dangerous, they said. But she saw something else in his eyes. Pain. Fear. Abandonment. And she refused to give up on him. Until the day she arrived and found something so heartbreaking, it shattered her. This is the story of a bond that defied fear, and of a heart that wouldn't give up, even when the world had already walked away. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. It helps us bring more emotional and inspiring stories like this straight to you. The cold had settled into the bones of Maple Hollow by late November. The leaves were gone, leaving only bare branches and the whisper of wind over frostbitten trails. Most people stayed indoors this time of year, sipping warm coffee and watching the snow roll in through the windows. But not Mabel. At 76, Mabel Richardson still believed in walking every morning. Not because she had to, but because it was the only time the world felt quiet. With her wooden cane tapping the earth and a small wicker basket swinging from her elbow, she moved slowly down the familiar trail behind her cottage. On that morning, something was different. She heard it before she saw it. A low, hoarse growl, almost like a warning, but muffled with exhaustion. Her hand froze on the handle of her cane. It came from the grove just off the trail, near the old willow tree that had split during the last storm. Carefully, heart thudding in her chest, she stepped through the underbrush. And there he was, tied to a tree, with a frayed rope cutting into his neck, was a large German Shepherd. His coat was matted and dirty, once likely black and tan, but now dulled by mud and neglect. His eyes, hollow and red, locked with hers. He didn't bark, he didn't lunge, he simply stared, chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Mabel's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, you poor boy," she whispered. She took a step closer. The dog growled low, not out of aggression, but warning. His body was curled tight, every rib showing. He was a canine. That much she could tell from the faint remnants of a worn tactical collar still clinging to his neck, scratched and barely readable. "Who left you here?" she asked softly. "Why would anyone leave you?" The answer, of course, wouldn't come. That first day, she didn't get close. She placed a leftover meatloaf sandwich on the ground 10 feet from the tree, set a bowl of water beside it, and backed away slowly. He didn't move until she was gone. The next morning, she came again. Same basket, same walk, same offering of food and soft words. On the third day, the sandwich was gone. Each visit, she got a little closer. She spoke to him like he was an old friend. She named him Sergeant. "You look like you used to be someone important," she said, "someone who mattered." She didn't know the full story. No one in town had reported a missing dog. The sheriff told her to leave it be. "That dog's not safe, Mabel. Probably trained to kill. If it's tied up, someone had a reason." She didn't believe that, not for a second. Even if he was trained to fight, she told the sheriff, someone still left him. That's not his fault. By the second week, she was close enough to place the food within arm's reach. He didn't growl anymore. He didn't wag his tail either, but his eyes, they followed her now, softer than before. Snow started to fall by the third week. Mabel brought him an old wool blanket, folding it neatly and laying it near the base of the tree. "It's not much," she said, "but it's warm. I used to wrap my grandkids in it, you know." She smiled, remembering. He didn't flinch when she reached out this time. Her hand hovered near his shoulder, close enough to touch. But she didn't force it. "Only if you're ready," she whispered. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake imagining him out there in the dark woods, cold, alone, still tied to that tree, like something forgotten. So the next morning, she packed a bigger lunch. She brought wire cutters. She told herself she was ready, but when she got to the willow grove, Sargent was gone. Not untied, not rescued. The rope still hung from the tree, snapped. The ground was disturbed, claw marks in the dirt, blood, and in the snow nearby, paw prints. Dragging, leading away into the deeper woods. Mabel dropped to her knees. No, 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 no. Something terrible had happened, and now he was out there, wounded, alone. She wasn't going to stop, not now. She stood, legs trembling, eyes wet with tears. She followed the prints, cane in one hand, the blanket in the other. "Hold on, Sargent," she said through chattering teeth. "I'm coming." Mabel had never walked that far into the forest before. The trail behind her home wound gently through the pines, but where the dog's tracks led, deep into the unkept thickets and frostbitten brush, was unfamiliar rough terrain. Still, she pressed on. She held the blanket close to her chest and used her cane to push aside low branches and heavy vines. The icy wind cut through her old coat, but the worry in her chest burned hot enough to ignore it. She followed the dragging paw prints in the snow, which were smeared with streaks of red, each one a silent scream that pushed her forward. "Please be alive," she whispered. "Please hold on." She didn't know why this dog had shaken her so deeply. Maybe it was the way he never barked after the first day, or how his eyes met hers with a kind of broken pride. He hadn't asked for her help, but he also hadn't turned it away. It was like he'd been waiting for someone to care. And she had. After nearly an hour, she reached a small clearing where the trees broke just enough for a thin patch of light to fall across the ground. At the center of it, lying curled in a bed of dead leaves and snow, was Sargent. He was breathing, but barely. His back leg was twisted unnaturally. The rope still tied loosely around his neck, trailing behind him like a ghost. His eyes fluttered open as she approached, and for the first time, he didn't flinch. "Oh no. You poor thing." She knelt beside him, brushing his matted fur gently. "I should have come sooner." He whimpered, a soft, hoarse sound that rattled through his chest. Mabel laid the blanket over his body and stroked his head with trembling fingers. He didn't growl. He didn't resist. He just closed his eyes, as if he finally believed he was safe. "I'm going to get you out of here, okay?" she said. "I don't know how yet, but I will. I promise." She didn't have a phone. Her old flip phone had no signal this deep in the woods. So she did the only thing she could. She made a nest of the blanket, tucked Sargent into it, and began clearing a path to drag him back. Every few feet, she stopped to catch her breath. Her back screamed, her knees ached. But she didn't turn around. She couldn't. Twice, she had to lift him gently over logs, whispering softly the entire time. "You're doing great, Sargent. Just a little further now. We'll get you warm soon." It took her nearly 3 hours to make it back to the edge of the grove where he'd first been tied. By then, her legs could barely hold her. Her breath came in wheezing bursts, and the sweat on her back turned cold under her coat. She collapsed beside him once they reached the tree, both of them shaking and silent. The sun was starting to set. That's when she heard the crunch of boots on snow. She turned sharply. A man stood at the edge of the trail, mid-30s, tall, faded army jacket. His face was rough, eyes sunken with guilt. Mabel stood slowly, shielding the dog. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice raw. The man looked at her, then at Sargent. "I used to be his handler," he said quietly. "His name's Rex. He was mine before everything went wrong. She froze. He saved my life in Kandahar, the man continued. And when we came home, I wasn't the same. I couldn't handle it. I lost my job. I lost everything. Her eyes narrowed. So you tied him to a tree? He lowered his head. I didn't mean to abandon him. I thought I was protecting him. I couldn't even feed myself. Mabel stared at him, torn between fury and heartbreak. You should have asked for help, she said. You don't leave family behind. The man nodded, his voice cracking. I know. She looked down at Rex, no longer Sergeant, and saw his ears twitch. His eyes slowly opened. When he saw the man, his body went still. They locked eyes, and in that moment, something amassed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but memory, recognition. Mabel placed a hand on Rex's head. You're going to help me get him out of here, she told the man, and then we're all going to figure out what comes next. He nodded, dropping to his knees beside the dog. Yes, ma'am, he whispered. Together, Mabel and the man who called himself Jake carried Rex through the last stretch of the woods. The dog was silent, eyes half open, his breathing shallow but steady. Jake cradled most of his weight in his arms, and though his strength came from a soldier's past, the burden clearly broke something deeper than bone. Mabel walked beside them, holding the blanket tightly in place over Rex's body, murmuring soft encouragement every few steps. Hang in there, sweetheart. We're almost there. By the time the forest thinned and the small gray roof of Mabel's cottage came into view, the last of the daylight was gone. The porch light glowed like a lighthouse across the snow. Jake's voice cracked in the darkness. I used to bring him home from every mission. He'd sleep beside my bunk. I swore he'd die an old dog in comfort. I broke that promise. Mabel didn't answer right away. She saw the tremble in his hands as he shifted Rex gently onto the old porch swing. His fingers brushed the dog's muzzle with an aching tenderness. She finally said, Sometimes redemption starts in the form of a second chance. If you want to make this right, start now. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and old books. Mabel quickly cleared the sofa, pulled out old towels, and lit the fireplace. Jake carried Rex in and laid him carefully on the makeshift bed in front of the flames. The dog's breathing slowed, soothed by the warmth. Jake sank into the nearest chair, his face buried in his hands. I don't even know why I came back to that tree, he said. It's like something pulled me there. Mabel poured 2 cups of hot tea. Maybe it was guilt, she said, or maybe he called to you. With dogs like him, it's never really silence. Jake looked up, and for the first time, tears glistened in his eyes. You don't understand. I loved him. He wasn't just a dog. He was my partner. When the bomb went off, Rex pulled me out from the rubble before the second blast. I lost 3 of my men that day, but he never left my side. Mabel listened in silence. She knew when a man needed to bleed through words. When we got back, Jake continued, I fell apart. PTSD, anger, drinking. I couldn't sleep without seeing the faces of the ones I didn't save. The VA offered to reassign Rex, but he wouldn't let anyone else near him. He barked, bit. So they discharged him too. And then it was just us, me and him in a motel room, with no money and no peace. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. And one day I snapped. I told myself he'd be better off without me. Mabel's voice was soft. But you're here now. I don't deserve to be. She reached over and put a hand on his arm. Then earn it. Don't walk away again. They sat in silence, listening to the fire crackle and Rex's steady breathing. Outside, the snow had started again, blanketing the world in hush. Around midnight, Rex stirred. His head lifted slightly, eyes blinking open. He saw Jake sitting nearby and let out a quiet, broken sound. Not a bark, but something like a sea. Jake moved closer, slowly reaching out. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. "I'm here." Rex didn't pull away. His nose touched Jake's hand. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was trust. Cracked and bruised, but still alive. Mabel smiled from her armchair. "I knew you still had fight in you," she whispered to the dog. "You both do." The old clock chimed once. They didn't speak after that. They just sat. The soldier, the shepherd, and the woman who refused to walk away. And for the first time in a long while, none of them were alone. The morning light filtered through the lace curtains of Mabel's living room, casting soft patterns across the old wooden floor. Rex lay curled on the blanket, his body warmer now. No longer shivering. The swelling in his back leg was obvious, and Mabel could tell he was still in pain. But there was something steadier about him, something returning. Jake hadn't left his side all night. He sat on the floor with his back against the couch, head tilted back, eyes open. He looked like a man haunted by more than just war. The past was stitched into every line of his face. Mabel noticed it when she placed a warm bowl of oatmeal in front of him. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. Jake shook his head. "Didn't feel right." She gave him a look, then motioned to the window. "The snow let up. Town's only a mile and a half. You should take him to the vet clinic. Dr. Spencer's good." Quiet. He won't ask too many questions. Jake looked down at Rex. "You trust me to walk out of here with him?" Mabel sat across from him. "If I didn't trust you, you wouldn't be here." Jake looked away, ashamed. "I don't trust myself." "Well," she said, sipping her tea, "start small. Trust the part of you that came back." Rex stirred, shifting slightly. His ears twitched at the mention of town. He raised his head, just enough to glance at Jake, then settled again. "He knows your voice?" Mabel added. "He's waiting for you to believe you're worth coming back to." It was a heavy morning. Jake finally agreed to take Rex to the vet, and with Mabel's help, they wrapped the dog carefully in a second blanket and lifted him into her truck. She offered Jake the keys. "You drive." He hesitated. "It's been a while." She smiled. "Then it's about time." They drove in silence. Rex rested in the back seat, his body rising and falling with every breath, his eyes tracking the landscape as it passed. The road to town was quiet. The frost still hung in the corners of windows, but the sun was finally pushing through. At the vet clinic, the receptionist looked up in surprise as they entered. "Is this a service dog?" she asked cautiously. Jake answered, firm and clear. "Retired K9. He's injured. Needs help." Dr. Spencer emerged from the back. A tall man in his 50s with kind eyes and a steady hand. He motioned them in without asking for paperwork. The moment he saw Rex, his brow furrowed. "How long's he been like this?" Jake explained. "Not everything, but enough." Spencer listened without judgment. "You're lucky," he said. "The leg's not shattered, just badly strained, probably pulled something trying to escape. He's malnourished, dehydrated, but he's still got heart." Rex barely moved during the examination. When Spencer wrapped the leg, Rex's head shifted just slightly toward Jake, as if seeking permission. Jake leaned down. "It's okay, boy. You're safe." After the visit, Dr. Spencer handed Jake a small bag. "With medicine, supplements, and instruction, he'll need a quiet place to rest," the doctor said. "Warmth, steady meals, and someone he trusts." Jake nodded. "I can do that." Back at Mabel's cottage, the mood had shifted. Jake moved more confidently. He laid Rex on the couch this time, carefully lifting his injured leg and resting it on a pillow. The dog didn't resist. Mabel watched from the kitchen as Jake whispered to him, stroking his ear, pressing his forehead gently to Rex's. "You stayed alive for a reason," Jake said quietly. "I'm gonna earn that." That night, Mabel found Jake outside on the porch, sitting on the steps, staring at the stars. She joined him, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "You're good with him," she said. "I wasn't," Jake replied, "but I wanna be." They sat in silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. "I think I'd like to stay a while," Jake said finally. Mabel smiled. "You're both welcome here, as long as you need." Inside, Rex shifted on the couch, his head resting against the armrest. The fire crackled softly. His eyes were closed, but his ears stayed up, listening, trusting, healing. For the first time since being tied to that tree, Rex knew where home was, and this time no one was going to leave him behind. A week had passed since Jake brought Rex back from the vet, and Mabel's cottage had become something of a quiet sanctuary for all three of them. The snow outside deepened, covering the trees in white silence. Inside, warmth pulsed from the old stone fireplace, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. Every morning, Jake rose early to prepare Rex's food, just as Dr. Spencer instructed. Soft-boiled eggs, rice, and small bits of meat. He knelt beside the dog, whispering encouragement as Rex slowly regained strength. The dog still limped heavily, but he no longer trembled. His eyes were brighter, and when Mabel walked by, he even wagged his tail. Just once, slow and tired, but unmistakable. Jake, too, had changed. His posture straighter, his voice steadier. He shaved for the first time in weeks, cleaned his old boots, and even began helping Mabel fix a broken cupboard door that had been off its hinges for months. But that peaceful rhythm was broken late one afternoon by the crunch of tires outside. Mabel peered through the curtain and frowned. "Sheriff Daniels," she murmured. Jake's body tensed immediately. He stood from the floor where he'd been brushing Rex and walked to the window. A patrol car idled at the end of the path. The sheriff stepped out, adjusting his thick winter coat, and made his way up to the porch. Mabel answered the door. "Afternoon, Mabel," he said kindly, then nodded at Jake behind her. "You're Jake Whitman, right?" Jake didn't answer right away. Then he stepped forward and nodded. "Yes, sir." "I got a call," Daniels said. "Someone in town recognized you at the vet clinic, said you were back in town with a canine that looked half dead." Mabel's voice was sharp. "That half-dead canine saved his life." Daniels held up a hand. "I'm not here to judge, but there are protocols. If Rex was military, he was probably registered. There's paperwork." Jake sighed. He was decommissioned. No chip, no reassignment. They let me keep him because he wouldn't work with anyone else, but I was broken. I wasn't ready to be responsible for anyone, not even him. Daniels looked at Rex through the open door. The dog lifted his head, ears alert. There was no bark, no fear, just a calm gaze. "Funny thing," Daniels said softly. "People in this town remember Rex. Some of us saw him in the parade the year you two got back. He was a hero. Still is." Jake blinked, stunned. Daniels took off his hat, rubbing the brim. "I ain't here to arrest anyone, Jake, but you should know. Someone left an anonymous report, said they saw you tie him up and walk away." Jake's face fell. "They're right." "But," Daniels added, "I see him here, safe, healing. That tells me something changed." Jake nodded. "Everything changed." Daniels looked at Mabel. "This woman, she's something else. You're lucky she found him." "I know," Jake said quietly. Daniels paused at the door. If you need help filing the vet papers, getting Rex registered again, let me know. He deserves to be documented. So do second chances. With that, the sheriff tipped his hat and left. Jake closed the door slowly, leaning against it. I thought I'd lose him again, he said. Mabel handed him a cup of tea. You didn't, and you won't. Not if you keep showing up. Later that night, Jake sat on the couch beside Rex, who now rested his head comfortably in Jake's lap. The fire flickered beside them. Jake spoke softly, his hand moving gently through the dog's fur. I'm not going anywhere, buddy, he said. Not ever again. And for the first time since that day under the tree, Rex made a sound Jake hadn't heard in months. A soft, almost imperceptible groan of contentment. Mabel watched from the kitchen, her eyes glistening. Sometimes the saddest stories didn't end in heartbreak. Sometimes they ended in healing. Snow continued to fall, blanketing Maple Hollow in a soft hush. Inside Mabel's cottage, it was warm and alive with quiet activity. The fireplace crackled, the kettle steamed, and the soft rhythm of life unfolded in small gestures. Jake rubbing salve on Rex's leg, Mabel humming while chopping vegetables, and Rex's gentle sighs as he drifted in and out of sleep, his head resting on Jake's worn jeans. But something lingered in the air that morning, unspoken, heavy. Jake sat at the kitchen table, staring at a folded letter in his hands. It was from the Department of Veterans Affairs, addressed to his old P.O. box. Mabel had retrieved it during her grocery trip and handed it to him without a word. He hadn't opened it yet. I was discharged dishonorably, he said quietly, eyes still on the envelope. Mabel stopped stirring the pot. You never told me that. Jake nodded slowly. Not many people know, not the whole story. I wasn't violent or dangerous. I just stopped showing up, missed counseling, missed check-ins. They said I abandoned my post, even though I was already back. You were sick, Mabel said gently. No one wants to say it, but trauma is an injury too. Jake finally opened the letter, unfolding it with hands that trembled. After a long pause, he whispered, They've reviewed my case. I'm eligible for reinstatement of benefits. Retroactive. Looks like someone filed an appeal on my behalf. Mabel raised her eyebrows. You think it was the sheriff? Jake shrugged. Or the VA counselor I yelled at 4 years ago. Or maybe someone out there still believes I'm worth helping. He stood and walked to the window, watching the snow swirl past the trees. I still don't know if I can forgive myself. Mabel came to stand beside him. Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through. It's a path, one you take one step at a time. Behind them, Rex slowly got to his feet. His limp was still there, but he was moving better, more confidently. He walked toward Jake and pressed his head gently into the man's leg. Jake lowered himself to the floor. His arms wrapped around the dog, and he buried his face in Rex's fur. I'm sorry, he whispered, for everything. And for a long moment, Rex stayed perfectly still. Then, softly, his tail tapped once against the floor. That single movement broke something open in Jake. Tears came, full and fast. Not just from regret, but from the possibility that maybe, just maybe, love hadn't given up on him after all. Later that afternoon, Jake took Rex outside for the first time since the day he found him in the clearing. The snow was knee-deep in some places, but Jake carried him down the steps, then walked slowly beside him as the dog sniffed the air and looked around with cautious wonder. You remember this place, don't you? Jake asked. They walked the perimeter of the woods together. Rex paused near the old willow tree. The rope was gone. Mabel had removed it days ago, but the memory remained in the soil, in the air, in the way Rex stiffened and stared. Jake crouched beside him. You never should have been left here. That's on me. Rex didn't move. But you made it, Jake continued. You waited, and someone showed up for you. And now, it's my turn to show up. As if he understood every word, Rex leaned slightly into Jake's chest. The man wrapped his arms around the dog's shoulders and closed his eyes, forehead against fur, the snow melting slowly, and to the earth around them. That night, by the fire, Jake asked Mabel something unexpected. What would you think, he said, if I turned this place into a canine rehabilitation space? Mabel blinked. What do you mean? For dogs like Rex, Jake said. Dogs that are thrown away, retired, broken. I want to build something here. Start small. A sanctuary. A second chance. Mabel's smile was slow but full of light. I think this place has always been meant for healing. Jake looked down at Rex, who was curled up near the fire, one paw draped over the other. I owe him that, he said. Mabel reached over and gently squeezed Jake's hand. Then let's make this a place where nothing and no one is ever left behind again. And in the flickering firelight, surrounded by silence, warmth, and second chances, something sacred was born. Spring arrived quietly in Maple Hollow. The snow melted from the trees, giving way to bright green buds and a hush of new life stirring in the soil. The path behind Mabel's cottage was now worn with use, not just from old footsteps, but from paw prints. Large ones, small ones, careful ones that dragged at first, but now moved with purpose. It had been 3 months since Jake first carried Rex through that door. 3 months since Mabel found the dog tied to a tree and refused to walk away. And now, everything had changed. The back of Mabel's land, once overgrown and forgotten, had been cleared. A modest but sturdy wooden enclosure stood under the shade of a tall pine, surrounded by fencing Jake built with his own hands. Inside, 2 more German shepherds roamed. One had been surrendered by a man going into hospice. The other had come from a shelter 3 counties away, labeled unadoptable after a history of biting. Here, both were calm, safe, healing. Rex, now strong enough to run, circled the perimeter proudly, occasionally stopping to sniff the grass or press against Jake's leg. His limp was still there, faint but permanent, a quiet reminder of where he came from. But his eyes no longer held pain. They held peace. Jake knelt beside him and whispered, "We did it, buddy." The project had taken shape faster than anyone expected. Mabel used part of her savings to fund the first phase. The sheriff helped connect them to local organizations, and a retired veterinarian offered part-time help once he heard Rex's story. Word began to spread. If a canine had nowhere else to go, there was a place for them here. Jake called it Rex's Refuge. One morning, as the sun warmed the Hoynd and the wind carried the scent of blooming lilacs, Jake stood outside the enclosure, watching the dogs play. Mabel came beside him, holding 2 mugs of coffee. 3 dogs in, she said with a smile, and 4 volunteers already asking when they can help more. Jake laughed softly. I thought I was just fixing a broken part of myself. I didn't realize I'd be building something for others, too. Mabel sipped her coffee. That's what healing does. It doesn't stop with you. Inside the fence, Rex approached a nervous new arrival, a smaller female shepherd with wide, uncertain eyes. Rex didn't bark or growl. He sat quietly and waited. After a long pause, she stepped forward and touched her nose to his. Jake's heart clenched. That's who he is, he whispered. Even after everything. You're both teachers now, Mabel said gently. And this land, this is your classroom. That evening, Jake wrote his first post on the sanctuary's website. He titled it, The Dog Who Waited. He told the full story, from war to the motel to the tree to Mabel. He didn't leave anything out. And at the end, he wrote, "He waited for someone to come back, and when I couldn't, she came instead. If this place means anything, let it be this: no creature should ever have to wait alone." The story went viral. Within days, donations poured in. People wrote from across the country, former handlers looking for their ducks, families wanting to adopt retired canines, strangers thanking Jake for giving them hope. Some even wrote that they too had tied things they loved to trees, metaphorically out of fear or pain or guilt, and now wanted to go back. One letter read, "I left my brother behind when he needed me most. Your story made me pick up the phone. Thank you for reminding me that it's not too late." Jake read it aloud to Mabel, his voice shaking. Rex, lying at his feet, lifted his head and licked his hand. Later that night, under the stars, Jake stood at the edge of the field with Rex beside him. The sky was clear, the wind gentle. He whispered, "You saved me long before I ever saved you." Rex didn't move. He didn't have to, because they both knew, in a world where so many stories end in silence, theirs would echo forever. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share it with someone who believes in second chances. And remember, sometimes the ones we rescue are the ones who save us.